Sometimes you think you know all there is to know about the world. Everything has its place. Everything is as it should be. But the beauty of the future is that it can be an unpredictable place with new forces and new ideas that challenge the status quo. Some of which turn the entire world upside down. This is the Purosangue, a Ferrari designed not for the racetrack, but for families. Ferrari, the icon of the sports car world, is doing something that 10 years ago we'd never imagined. Delivering its first ever car with 4 doors and 4 full-size seats and an interior dripping in luxury, flipping the world truly on its head.
Some people would say that this car is a cynical attempt by Ferrari to cash in, to capitalize on the success of the Lamborghini Urus. And yeah, I was one of those people. I thought this was going to be aimed at people with more money than sense, and that it would follow the same dry format, that Ferrari would cram in a twin turbo V8 with a torque converter and 48 volt active roll stabilization, you know, standard rules. But then I had a closer look at the thing, and it seems Ferrari have torn up the rulebook completely.
The name Purosangue translates from Italian as pureblood, an odd choice for an SUV you might think, but then it does use a thoroughbred Ferrari engine, the 6.5 litre naturally aspirated V12 borrowed from the 812 Superfast.
Here it makes 725 horsepower, so it goes like a Ferrari, and it sounds like a Ferrari. Plus, because they've used their 7-speed dual clutch transmission, the gear changes are lightning quick. Yeah, this is a proper prancing horse.
But while this might feel like Ferrari turning the world of SUVs on its head, cynics will point to the fact that while the Purosangue trumps its rivals for peak power, Ferrari's effort is actually down on torque, with 716 Nm versus 850 in the Urus and 900 in the DBX 707.
But you know what? I don't think those particular numbers matter because it's still ridiculously quick. 0 to 62 in 3.3 seconds. I mean, that's as quick as you're going to accelerate in any SUV out of the factory. Top speed, 194 miles an hour, top of the class, and 0 to 124 miles an hour in 10.6 seconds. By my maths, that's over a second quicker than the Urus Performante and the DBX 707. It's an animal.
And there's one other top trumps category where the Purosangue destroys the competition: cash money. The starting price for Ferrari's family car? £313,000. That's more expensive than even the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, but that's the price you pay for exclusivity. The Urus is based on an Audi, the fastest Cayenne is based on the slowest Cayenne, and the DBX borrows its engine from a Mercedes. This is an original design not based on lesser cars donated from a parent company.
And in this world, that counts for an awful lot, as does design. So let me give you a quick whistle-stop tour around the Purosangue. The first thing you notice about this car is that it's split into 2 distinct sections, a body-colored upper section and a black lower section, which almost gives you the impression the body is bolted to the chassis. The face itself is typical Ferrari in the modern era, so it has a lot in common with the Roma, SF90 and the 296 GTB. But, whisper it, I think this car is prettier than all of those. It just has an amazing stance, a really good profile, and it's just a brilliant thing to look at. This particular car is finished in Rosso Corsa, or traditional Ferrari red, but regardless of which color you go for, all Purosangues have this black strip across the front, which is there to help disguise the various sensors on the front of the car, including a forward-facing camera, and some ultrasonic parking sensors. The rest of it, though, is an exercise in aerodynamic trickery. And by that, I mean it's absolutely covered in vents and ducts and slats. Look at this, down here on the leading edge, the front splitter channels air underneath the car in a controlled way towards that rear diffuser. And you might think that the headlights are located here. They're not, they actually live down here. These are just basically vents to help channel air partly into the engine bay to help keep things cool, and also over the top of the wheel arch to reduce the turbulent air around this area. Typically on this kind of SUV, the wheel arches are in place to provide an air of ruggedness and protection from the elements, but on the Purosangue, that's completely different. These are all about aero. Notice on the front edge, this open section helps to channel air around these 22-inch wheels at the front, 23s on the rear, and then the rear edge helps to keep the air concealed along the side of the car. Beautiful to look at and absolutely fascinating.
There's more aerodynamic trickery at the rear. The airflow initiated by the front splitter is evacuated by a dramatically sculpted rear diffuser. And higher up, it has a spoiler designed not for downforce, but to divert air along the curved rear glass. This, according to Ferrari, eliminates the need for a wiper. As for the boot, it's a fairly good size, with good underfloor storage, an adjustable partition, and naturally, an electrically operated boot lid.
Speaking of electrically operated, let me show you the Purosangue's party piece. Suicide electrically operated doors. The fronts open as normal, but the rears are operated using this tiny latch. A short press just presents it to you, but then a long press opens it automatically, allowing you to step easily inside the car. And look how wide the gap is. Then, once you're in, loads of headroom, a significant amount of legroom, and it's a pretty comfortable place to hang out. This blows my mind because Ferrari don't normally mess around with fancy doors, but they've done it in the Purosangue. If you want to close it, push and hold this button and say goodbye. Rolls-Royce who?
In the rear, passengers will find a cabin erring more on the sporty rather than luxurious side with 2 individual seats. Both have Isofix for 2 baby seats, and there's an armrest with a wireless charging dock next to a pair of USB ports and a clever rotary control for the heating system that rises from the center console. Storage is a bit stingy, but there's an optional sunroof letting in plenty of light or a carbon roof that comes as standard. As family cars go then, it's surprisingly good. What you really want to know though is whether it's fun to drive, and the good news is it's brilliant. Part of that is down to the monster V12, the astonishingly quick gearbox and the epic sound, but a lot of it is down to the car's astonishing agility.
If you're expecting this car to feel like a big old lump, you're going to be disappointed because it's really, really lovely to drive. It's up on its toes, it feels agile, it feels more like a sports car than an SUV. The steering's really interesting. So in most Ferraris, you get lightning quick steering. That isn't quite the case here. It's a little bit slower than in any other Ferrari. But it's playful, even though it's an SUV.
Part of that agility comes from the fact that it sends most of the power to the rear wheels, so it will happily drift if you want it to, but if traction's what you need, a power transfer unit up front can engage the front wheels for all-wheel drive in a similar way to the Ferrari GTC4 Lusso. A unique rear-wheel steering system which can turn a single rear wheel rather than both simultaneously is said to offer better responsiveness than a traditional system that turns both wheels at once, particularly in consecutive bends where one wheel is always centered and ready to countersteer without a reset.
You kind of have to reset your brain somewhat because when you turn in, you expect the car to hold a certain line, but then the rear wheel steering engages and suddenly it's holding a tighter line than you might have anticipated. You don't get a ton of understeer in this car. If you want it to be, it can be very tail happy.
The suspension is new too, no anti-roll bars here. Instead, it uses motors on each wheel to push each corner of the 2.1-ton Purosangue up or down independently in the bends to keep the car flat and the tires in contact with the road. Body control and damping are both excellent, even in the sportiest settings. But if you need even more compliance, there's a bumpy road setting. And impressively, during launch control, the car has the ability to squat dramatically, allowing it to explode from the blocks for a superior getaway.
And it's so effective. It feels super flat in the corners, flatter than it has any real right to. And the weight distribution is absolutely tremendous. It's 49% up front and 51% at the rear. And that's partly due to the fact that that big V12, even though it's heavy, is actually mounted behind the front wheels. This thing is mid-front engine.
Obviously, one of the big questions about the Puro is it worth the astronomical price? That's always going to be up for debate, but it does combine thrilling performance and exclusivity with up-to-date equipment and technology.
I quite like the way they've laid this stuff out. Everybody in the cabin will feel like they're in their own unique cockpit and they'll all feel special. It's actually quite refined. We're running on winter tires at the moment. Normally it comes on Michelin Pilot Sport 4S's, and winter tires can be a little bit on the noisy side, but this is actually surprisingly quiet. We've got some double glazing, we've got obviously a ton of sound deadening materials, and it feels quieter and calmer when you're not on it than any Ferrari that I've ever been in. The materials are quite good. We've got carbon fiber, we've got leather, we've got a little bit of Alcantara, sustainably sourced apparently, and it does feel special in here. It is a little bit of a usability nightmare though, because all of the major functions are controlled via buttons on the steering wheel, and that includes indicators. Your wipers are a knob for some reason, and it's hard to remember which of these serves what purpose. The infotainment screen looks great. It's very similar to the one they use in the Ferrari Roma, but again, it can be quite tricky to use, especially on the move, because you have to use these buttons on the steering wheel to correspond with everything that's happening on the display, and it can feel a little bit sluggish, a bit unresponsive. Passengers get their own screen as well, which they can use to look at driving information or control the infotainment system. Speaking of which, the car comes as standard with a Burmester stereo, which sounds absolutely incredible. The other thing I want to talk about is this really interesting pop-out dial on the dashboard, which lets you control your heating, ventilation, and climate controls. Complete overkill, but looks really cool.
Ferrari doesn't like to shout about the Purosangue's off-road capability, but then neither does Rolls-Royce or Lamborghini with their equivalent products. That said, it shouldn't shy away from slippery surfaces thanks to a Manettino mode switch that lets you select from ice, wet, comfort, sport, and ESC off. The car's primary purpose though is on the road, where it's more thrilling than any of its direct rivals.
The cynic inside me didn't really want to like this car. When I first heard about it, I thought Ferrari were too late to the game and they were just going to do what everyone else did, except in red. I was wrong. This thing has changed the game. It set a whole new benchmark for what a sporty family car can be. And notice I said car.
It's perhaps not as good an all-rounder or as practical as the Urus, perhaps not ultimately as comfortable as a Bentley Bentayga, or as ostentatiously luxurious as a Rolls-Royce Cullinan, but not one of its rivals can match it for driving pleasure. The combination of that V12, the performance, the noise, the spectacular looks, and the absolutely unrivaled agility mean that Ferrari has, without doubt, turned this bizarre corner of the automotive world completely on its head.